All right, good evening. My name is Han Hubert In. Hubert actually is really my middle name. It's really great pleasure to be part of this course, to interact with international students here at Tsinghua. So in the next hour and a half, I was hoping to provide a perspective to this anti-COVID campaign. Because in the last almost 3 years, I feel just one thing we can really get around would be this pandemic, right? This COVID-19 disease is just overwhelming. I was hoping to provide, from my perspective, as well as this one from Tsinghua also, as a part of this introductory course to China. So, well, actually, I was working here from the biomedical hall at the northwest corner on campus. I saw this lunar eclipse. Did you guys see that? Tonight definitely is a special time, right? So apparently, like nowadays, people just share everything in the WeChat group. I shared this. I took a picture and shared this in one of my friends' WeChat. And other people send pictures from Guangzhou, from Shanghai, from other places also. We saw this, fast-moving shadow of the Earth moving on the surface of the moon. But apparently in Guangzhou, they didn't see that at all. They just see a bright, cloudy day. So definitely, like from different directions, we have different perspective. For such an important thing like COVID, I feel to provide our perspective would be at least an interesting topic. And for mine, of course, because I teach at the pharmaceutical science school, I was hoping this also provides some of this with a certain discipline. Let me quick check here, although we don't really have too many students here tonight. So how many of you guys are with science and engineering background? So what discipline? What kind? Industrial engineering. Double E. How about humanities? Double E and? A law school, of course. English literature. God, Shakespeare is my favorite. What about you guys? Social sciences. Interesting. So again, just like watching the moon from Guangzhou and Beijing, I feel people with different background, especially different technical background, would understand certain things from different way. Of course, you know, Tsinghua is a 111-year-old university now. This picture is from last year, of course, from our most famous alumni, like at least one of the most famous alumni, President Xi Jinping, when he came back right before the anniversary. Actually, 5 years before that, at 105 anniversary, President Xi also wrote a letter to Tsinghua. The way an old graduate describes the characteristic for Tsinghua would be, this is the university to bring together the Chinese or the Oriental in general, if you like, and Occidental with the West, also the ancient time and the modern time, as well as art, science, and other disciplines. I feel this is pretty accurate, especially for the pharmaceutical science. You think that is medicine, in the general field of medicine. I feel those things would be important areas we need to pay attention also, especially during the COVID time. Again, when you walk into this building, you still check your temperature. When you actually do international travel these days, you still need to show your vaccine certificate and so on. So the day before yesterday, I checked the up-to-date World Health Organization statistics, the current accumulation for COVID already actually hits a doubting 629 millions. That is, I think that's just like unbelievable. Of course, with those countries at the top on the list. So we have been keep thinking, so when is the end? How can we really like take off the mask for good? And also here in China, for certainly vaccines and drugs would be really helpful for us to overcome those challenges eventually. So apparently this would not be possible unless this is a global coordination. And Tsinghua, as a member of the community, we definitely have our share of the duties. So I borrowed some of these old slides from back 2020. Actually, this is one of the early international class MOOC also. So today, earlier today, when I look at these things, I think that's still pretty amazing, right? Back like 3 years ago, we talked about use traditional Chinese medicines. We're going to elaborate a little bit of this TCM. That's actually an interesting topic. And we talk about really facing a challenge we did not know before. What can we do? So a lot of people here at Tsinghua work in this field. For example, this actually is an online course also organized also by President Yang Bin back then, when President Yang actually talked to this Sino-Africa Summit. This actually back then when the COVID started spreading around the world. Some of our African friends actually approached us because apparently they did not have this fancy neutralizing antibody drugs that President Donald Trump could use back then. They were talking, maybe we can actually learn something about this traditional Chinese medicines could be an alternative way to overcome this challenge also. So people here at Tsinghua, for example, President Cheng Jing, he's a professor at the Biomedical Engineering Department. Professor Dong Jiahong, he is the head of the Chang'an Hospital affiliated with Tsinghua. Zhang Linqi, who actually developed the very first specific COVID drug in China, and also a professor at the School of Medicine, Professor Ding Sheng, and myself, Professor Jing, at the School of Medicine and School of Social Science also, all actually from different perspectives to look at the pandemic and share our views. So I myself actually came from the School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, just like a couple of words here. So we locate at the, right after you enter the northwest gate, about 20 minutes walk from this point. People always say Tsinghua is really too big, you just walk forever to cross the campus. So we are one of actually the newest schools here at Tsinghua. The school was founded on Christmas Day back in 2015, December 25th. We have about 110 staff members, 74 undergraduates, and over 200 graduates, and so on. So at School of Pharmaceutical Science, again, why School of Pharmaceutical Science? I'm not sure, like I'm pretty, so people have pretty different cultural background here, right? So for me, for example, I grew up here, right here in Beijing, and I spent most of my adult time actually in the United States. In the US, most of the school would have a school pharmacy because basically they just actually like train the pharmacist. And in China here is a little different. We do not have that system, but rather the scientific research of those pharmaceuticals would actually like render a basically a niche for pharmaceutical science. That's why we named that school with that name. So in our school, we look at the interdisciplinary frontiers. Apparently, like infectious disease, COVID would be one of them. And this is a so-called basic applied disciplines also. So this actually has something to do with engineering, has something to do with science, also has something to do with like laws and other things also. It's certainly applied to innovation and entrepreneurship, and for drug development, it's a huge effort. Even nowadays, we still do not have a highly effective drug for this COVID. So global collaboration is definitely an essential part for our disciplines. Actually, in on our advisory board at SPS of Tsinghua, we also have really like many heads of global companies such as Amgen, Pfizer, J&J, and so on. And of course, industry alliance is a critical part and one of the pillars at SPS. So I was thinking about how really like I want to structure this class. Again, this is a rapid evolving field compared to the MOOC lecture I gave 3 years ago. I felt like so many things have changed. I almost could not use any of this previous slide I prepared 3 years ago when COVID just hit. So I was thinking maybe, again, just a perspective from a pharmaceutical scientist, right? One of them, a view. So I was hoping to introduce to you some of these efforts we had here in China, especially also, in particular in Tsinghua also, contributing to the global coordination against the disease, particularly in the drug and the vaccine development. And also, say, the last part, I want to actually share with you some of this traditional Chinese medicine. I feel this is a China-specific topic, if you like. All right, so I want to actually have my first pause here. Any questions? Right, let's kick off. So COVID, again, this is one of the words, one of the terms we saw so much in the past 3 years. Many of us got affected more or less by this disease, right? COVID-19. So in Chinese, we would call that 新冠肺炎. Literally, that means, how to say that? Literally, that's a pneumonia. It's a lung infection. So at the very beginning, of course, we know this was a disease that was first reported in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, in central parts of China. Almost 3 years, can you believe that? Time really flies. So, but it's really not, it's far more beyond a pneumonia. So at the early time, of course, a lot of these patients got affected. They were diagnosed with the pneumonia-like symptoms, right? And we do know now that when patients showed symptoms such as a fever, fatigue. By the way, anyone got infected by COVID before here? You? How do you feel back then? So which variation, which strain? Omicron, so recently, in the last year or so? Yeah. So, but do you feel any discomfort in the lung, like deep, or rather just a throat and upper respiratory system? Right, so this actually is more, so from the original strain, when it developed into Delta and Omicron more recently, it became actually less and less lung relevant. But at the beginning, definitely, besides the upper respiratory systems, the lung, the liver, even the kidney, and many other organs got affected by COVID also. So that is the reason, although in Chinese, and maybe like when you talk with your Chinese friend, when they heard like 新冠, that's a short for the COVID pneumonia. This is really the official name we use now. It's called COVID-19. I compare here, so back in 2019, when basically around the time in December, when they first in Wuhan saw the sequence of this disease, they saw a pretty rather striking similarity with the SARS. So I think maybe for students, many of you guys were too young for that. Do you still recall this 2003 SARS epidemics? That's, back then I was still in grad school. I went to grad school in New Haven in the US. And so in North America, it got hit also. For example, Toronto, actually in Canada, was one of the cities got affected pretty badly. So SARS actually with very high mortality. Here it's like around 10%. So compared to a bad flu, by the way, it's a flu season. Like I know Tsinghua Hospital offer up-to-date vaccines, so definitely got your flu shot. That's one of the most helpful way to prevent you from infection. So that make actually SARS one of the most dangerous infectious disease. So after that, there's MERS from the Mideast, but many of these really like this viral disease really like scare people. So when they first actually like identified COVID-19, the sequence suggests a really high sequence similarity with SARS. So this really like actually like put the alarm on. But there's still actually like also many differences also. So as I mentioned, like what we talk about here, this virus actually is quite, so for Omicron, for example, this R0 number is already between 5 to 10, even higher with some of this more recent derivative from their ancestors, suggesting a higher spreading of these viruses. So at the very beginning, it's not really that strong. So you can see this actually like this is evolution also of the virus. It's actually grow along with the times. And also with other clinical features, for example, the fevers, the original strain give you mostly low or normal temperatures, and lung actually is one of them. So this remind me, as we talked about in December, this disease was first discovered in Wuhan, and it came to Tsinghua around the time of late January. I still remember that day, January 20th of 2020. That is the Chinese New Year Eve. We call that 除夕 or 大年三十. So that is the time you're supposed to actually stay home, getting together with, reunited with your family and celebrate the New Year. So that day on 2020, we had a whole day meeting at the president's office at Gongziting, like the really like actually like by the center of the campus, and President Wang Xiqin back then he was still one of the vice president, just came back from the UK the day before that, and when I look, and he actually convened people from School of Medicine, School of Pharmaceutical Science, and asking for advice on how we should prepare this pandemic. But back then we really didn't see this happening. We just didn't see like really in the next 3 years even. We're still doing those things. And back then, I was actually, for example, offering a idea to actually use some of this traditional Chinese medicine decoction. You know, like in China, we use some certain herbs to help you to, to fight against flu and so on. So we were thinking actually back then to have one of the soup from skullcap. This is one of the anti-inflammation, anti-flu herb, and our colleagues in the hospital think that is like far from adequate to help us, to prevent us from the infection. So we didn't do that. But anyway, so at the beginning, we really didn't have very little clue on how this is going to develop. So COVID-19, again, I know actually not anyone, maybe some of you guys online with biology or medical background. So I'll give some general background of this disease, right? So COVID-19 is caused by this virus called, in short, called SARS-CoV-2. From this name, you can tell this basically has we really fall in the same family with the original SARS that hit us back in 2003 also. So this is one of the viruses in the subfamily called beta coronavirus. So from this is actual image. This is actually, if you took a picture of the virus using electron microscope, you actually see this. This looks like a crown, right? This is a virus, like artistic view of this. And if you look more closely, this is rather simple structure if you think about that. Life actually is, again, pretty amazing. This is a form of, you can call that creature, I guess, on this planet Earth. You only have a little bit protein, some nucleic acid, and that's pretty much it. Right? Think about this. Like, I wouldn't really call this is anything primitive or like we are more advanced life form or something. This is just a virus. They know how to, they also evolve going through billions of times of evolution. So it's so simple. Only like a few different proteins could be found on this virus. One is called E protein. The other one is called spike protein. It looks like a spike. And this is this is very important in the infection process. And actually in the test, like when you, I'm sure like you did your nucleic acid test today, right? So besides that, they scratch on like in your mouth, and they also do environmental tests. They really like test some of this surface protein. One of the most important one is the S protein. There is also M protein, and there is a N protein also. And basically, this is almost like an envelope to pack some of the nucleic acid. Okay, it's such a simple thing. It's really simple. And how this actually work? Again, this is a very simple assembly, if you will. They really need to hijack the machinery of the host. They need to actually hijack your system to reproduce. And that is the definition for life, right? Life is something that can reproduce itself to actually like produce offspring and so on. So for these viruses, SARS-CoV-2, basically, it needs to get into your cell. And this actually shows, just imagine this is a lung, right? This is the alveolus septal. So upon its entry, it basically got wrapped up by a thing called endosome. We call this a small particle in the cells. And it would release some of this nucleic acid, like RNA, into this. Like we do know, we use nucleic acid to pass the genetic information. This, again, is a quite amazing thing. Each of us, and also in each of your cell, you have exact same copy of DNA, one from your father, one from your mother. Only the limited number of genes really produce like all different cell phenotype, and really give your bone, give your heart, give your neurons. They actually have the exact same genetic information. So the nucleic acid as a genetic information carrier is really efficient. How many, do you guys know how many genes a human, like you or me, we would have? How many different copies of genes? Let's guess. How about 2,000? 20,000? 200,000? 2 million? Let's do a quick test. Who would think we will have 2 million different genes? 200,000? 20,000? 2,000? Okay, I might mislead a little bit. Pretty few, but not that few. We're really actually complex animal, right? So we have about 23,000 different genes. But still, that's pretty amazing. All of different proteins, they were encoded in such a limited number of genes. And this 20,000 different genes actually produce over 1 million different proteins. And these proteins give you hair, give you bone, and give different things. So for coronavirus, they have only about 30,000 base pairs, right? For nucleic acid, if you remember, this is a polymer. Engineers, this polymer is the repeating building blocks of the thing. Like protein, for example, it's like one amino acid after one amino acid to repeat. For nucleic acid, you would have different bases, right? For RNA, that the only difference, they have one different base from DNA. So for RNA, in order to reproduce, again, life needs to produce themselves. They would need an enzyme. Enzyme is a protein called RNA replicase in this RNA synthesis. And for those proteins, they would act like a protein is called polypeptide. This is another different polymer from the viruses would be released from the virus. So the virus would do, they would cut itself. This is a so-called self-cleavage, basically to convert a polypeptide to a non-structural proteins that can basically trigger the replication process. And then it's actually like reproduce like 1,000 copies and then release to the environment. It's a simple, short life cycle of the virus. And this actually provides different ways to control it. There are different therapeutic intervention strategies, and many of them actually like you might be pretty familiar with. For example, for the membrane fusion step, as I mentioned, they would utilize this endosome to get into the cells. A drug called the hydroxychloroquine has been used. I saw like some of you guys were starting smiling. Did you hear about this? Did you know about this drug? This actually is a common drug. So let's see. Do you guys know anyone who had autoimmune disease such as the rheumatoid arthritis, or like RA, right? We call it the RA, or let's see, lupus, for example, this autoimmune diseases. So the primary according to the current guideline, you would first be treated by this guy, hydroxychloroquine. So this actually is originally was developed as an anti-malaria drug. This is an infectious disease drug, right? This was back in like 70 years ago. A compound was identified as anti-malaria. When people in the old time, when people actually travel to Vietnam, for example, or Singapore, they would actually take the chloroquine before they travel to those tropic region. But also back in the 70s, physicians actually discovered when patients take this drug, they would have some release from their rheumatoid arthritis. That is actually a pretty painful disease. If you know anyone actually who got this, this is one of the disorders from the immune systems. But interestingly, back then, during the 2020, using the repurposing strategy, people found chloroquine could be one of the drugs to prevent this COVID actually get into cells. Actually, if you actually want to listen back, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, once actually recommended this particular drug to the public also. And FDA temporarily approved this drug to release some of this COVID-19 symptom. But I don't know, President Trump also recommended other things such as the laundry detergent and the disinfect also. I'm not sure how efficient those strategies would be. And another thing actually is this one called the remdesivir. This actually is the famous one. This actually blocks the RNA-dependent polymerase. I'm going to elaborate this a little bit. Other approach to block this ACE2 receptor. This actually is found your epithelial surface, your skin surface cells. Actually, this spike protein of the virus was recognized by this protein, and they recruit another protein called the TMPRSS. Oh yeah, all of this biological term, it's just they make no sense, right? Actually, you don't have to remember this. People actually still do know the function of this protein. This definitely is useful because you found in our body with like over evolution, we actually have those proteins. They must actually serve some function, but we didn't really know the exact function of these. ACE2 has something to do to control your blood pressure. So anyway, these smart viruses hijack the system and get into the cells. So there are drugs also to target S protein ACE2 interactions, as well as other steps, such as the cleavage step. This was catalyzed by a protein called protease. Okay. So all of these efforts were tried before. So a lot of different efforts have been tried. For example, small molecule drugs. That's like, what do we think about the pills, right? When you walk into a drugstore, aspirin and those things, we would call this small molecule drugs. They actually would include antiviral drugs. Those you typically use when you actually first got the infection, and that can really help you to release the symptoms. And biologics, these days more and more large biological molecules such as the proteins or sometimes the nucleic acid or nucleic acid mimetics or vaccine have been used. We use cell therapies also from different types of the cells, immune cells for example. Gene therapy is also actually like cutting edge technologies, but still now there's no one in trials. And also medical device, you heard about this name ECMO for the serious patients affected by COVID. So again, we talked about back in 2019, we just so this already 16 years after the 2003 SARS. And people got really like panicking, already like almost 16 years passed without major pandemics. So the drug development process actually is a long, very costly, and usually very costly procedure. By average, you need about 10 years to develop one single drug. And this actually involves screening of millions of different compounds and multi-stage in clinical trials. In China, it's the same thing with the European and American standard. We usually go 3 different phases of clinical trials. The first phase pretty much focuses on the safety. We would test a drug first in healthy volunteers, and the second one would actually test the efficacy. And then the third one would be a larger scale test to test the efficacy in patients. So this would take a long time, and apparently like in early 2020, we did not have that time to wait forever for the drug. So one of the quick ones would be repurposing, such as the hydroxyquinoline, for example, I just mentioned to you, right? Although this is an anti-malaria drug, although these days it has been widely used as an autoimmune disease drug, but if that actually could work against COVID, why not? People have been using this for many, many different years, so the safety has been confirmed at least. So there is other things called, for example, off-label use, meaning you use this as not something actually on the label you found on this bottle of your drug. This is actually like pretty common also. People take aspirin, for example. Aspirin is one of these miracle drug. Have so many different functions. It helps to reduce your coagulation. Of course, it kills fever and many other things. And of course, for mid or to long term, still we definitely need better efficacy and safety, different mechanism, and so on. Those new drugs to overcome. For the sake of time, I'll just skip a couple of slides here. This actually described at the early stage, really like rapidly. This actually like a showcase the global coordination around the world. Today, actually, I was checking. There's still like numerous clinical trial drug development projects ongoing 3 years into this pandemics. From countries like, you can exactly like find some of these names, Ukraine, Greece, Cyprus, they have their independent drug development project. That's pretty impressive. Again, this is a very costly process, and many different countries actually like work together on the drug development. I want to mention a few different things, again, just as a general background introduction. This could be like one of the early star, if you will, for anti-COVID drugs. This one is called Remdesivir. In China, back in 2020, a lot of people know this. Of course, this is a very, it almost sounds like a tongue twister in English to pronounce that. In China, we would call that 人民的希望. I know it's kind of hard to actually make a comparison here, right? Remdesivir, and this sounds like people's hope, and the actual pronunciation sounds a little bit. So again, 2020, we did not have any drugs. We hope to actually have some of these drug candidates, at least, that we can actually use. So one of the things, though, for different viruses, they use similar mechanism to infect their host. Remember, the viruses are really simple, right? Just some S protein and some E proteins. So they also use similar machinery to produce themselves. For antiviral drugs, the challenge is to overcome the mutations, because viruses really, for each generation, they really take really short time. So Omicron, for example, they really involve simple mutations on the S protein, but it actually makes the viruses so much more infectious. This is just amazing. But on the good side, though, nowadays, COVID, this SARS-CoV-2 virus, almost saturate all of the mutations in S proteins. So could there be anything more dangerous than Omicron? It could, to be honest. But at least the current strain, vaccine would definitely be really useful, because again, the difference between Omicron, Delta, they were really not that huge. We did actually see those vaccines help to really release these serious symptoms and so on. So anyway, back to this story. Gilead, which is one of the leading biotech company based in San Francisco and Boston, had early drug candidates called this Remdesivir. This one is designed for a different virus called Ebola. And Ebola has been with us for many years also. Just like coronavirus, just like SARS-CoV-2, it also involves the same machinery. And also actually the same thing with hepatitis C and HIV as well. So those antiviral drugs really could be, in principle, be used for COVID. So the theory is that why don't we just use some of this antiviral drug to kill COVID? Why not? So, but whether this actually works is the question. This again is actually shows a roller coaster sort of a story. Let's check this. This is a paper, front page of a paper from the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the leading journal in medical science. So this actually shows the Remdesivir treatment for COVID actually is effective. Let's see, they checked altogether 1,062 patients, and basically when we test those drugs, we would do this experiment called double blind. Basically, we give either a drug or a placebo to the patients, but we didn't tell them whether they got the drug or a placebo. So, and then we compare, carry out the statistic analysis between these two groups. This drug, basically, those people who actually received the Remdesivir had the median recovery time of 10 days compared to 15 days for those who received placebo. So you might say, this actually doesn't sound very drastic difference, right? But we, back then, at least the New England Journal of Medicine, the leading scientists in the world did believe this drug helped to shorten the disease, so this whole process. But things also changed. And then FDA, this Food and Drug Administration of the United States, in December, proved the emergency use of this People's Hope drug. Although this actually was first designed as an Ebola drug. However, a month after that, the World Health Organization recommends against the use of these drugs because with a larger scale, so-called consolidated experiments, they did not see significant difference between those who received placebo and from those who actually received the drug. This once again shows this again is a very difficult, very challenging project to very challenging goals to achieve. And then we got Paxlovid. Did you take it last time when you got infected? So my understanding is currently this is at least one of the most effective drugs. What drug did you take, by the way? Maybe I should ask. Did you take any drug or just like rest?
So it was like Arbutal and then like some antivirus, nasal drops.
Oh, I don't recall this antiviral drug's name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I was curious about that. So, but anyways, although this could be actually one. This is the first drug really like originally designed for COVID and approved for this specific use also. So this protein, the target of this drug was this one called main protease. A protease is enzyme that cleaves the peptide, the polypeptide. Remember, when the polypeptide released from the viruses, when after the viruses enter the cells, it would actually cut itself to produce a non-structural proteins. And this main protease, or aka 3CL, in short we call this a 3C sometimes, would be a major strategy because if you cut this process, viruses would stop to reproduce itself. So in the spring of 2020, the global company Pfizer actually started actually like this process to design a drug against this enzyme. The strategy actually is pretty simple, right? I'm not sure in engineering and other fields you guys use the same thing also. In drugs, sometimes we use something like almost like a decoy. Basically, enzyme is a catalyst to convert something to a different form. And if you actually make a mimic of the substrate, we call it substrate, we would actually block this catalyst and stop its function. If it's okay with you guys, I would just continue and we would just actually have this 90 minutes class. Okay, come back to this. So this drug actually is two different species packed under the same code, in the same package. One of the chemical is this one called the nirmatrelvir. So all of this antivirus drug with this VIR at the end. If you saw this, you know this is the drug and that actually target the virus. And this is the reason we use the brand name also because people can never remember those chemical names. This one would be called Paxlovid. So this particular drug is one of those to target this 3C protease. And then it was also co-administered with ritonavir. That is just basically to slow down, to help its metabolism, to actually help the so-called pharmacological dynamics. So this drug, again, as I mentioned, is the very first actually approved in December last year for the emergency use for COVID. And early this year, actually, it's like I saw this is still under assessment, but actually at least to give light at the end of the tunnel, we definitely see drugs started working. And as I mentioned before, by average, a drug would take 10 years to actually go through the pipeline. This is already light speed for drug development. This actually is pretty amazing. 3 years into a pandemic, we actually got a new drug from the beginning, actually pushed it through the pipeline. Of course, there is a catch also. SARS-CoV-2 mutant all the time. Although Paxlovid has already shown to have a reasonable efficacy against different variants, different mutants, but there is the drug resistance already started showing. Again, as I mentioned, this is a Chinese introduction course. I want to actually mention about, again, China's efforts on this and also at Tsinghua, right? Because when we, think about most of the drugs we use, many, if not most, of them really were developed in the Western countries, Japan, Europe, and the US. So China hasn't really actually contributed too much to the modern drug development, but there are some exceptions I would mention, but not too many. But in this COVID campaign, we definitely actually made our contribution. In this paper, this is a paper actually published about half a year into this pandemic. This was a collaboration by the Chinese Academy of Science and also the Shenzhen Hospital affiliated with Tsinghua, also with the International Graduate School. And one of the famous structural biologists at Tsinghua, his name is called Professor Rao Zihe. I think I saw there are a lot of his academic science members portrait actually hanging in this classroom building. I'm sure you can find him somewhere. But anyway, he solved the main protease structure of this protease I mentioned to you, like that Paxlovid targets. This structure helps you to design new drug, right? These days we talk about artificial intelligence. Computers can even help you to actually design new drugs. It's very powerful too. I myself actually serve as a consultant for different venture capitalists. For example, in the last 2 years, Vision is a SoftBank capital, venture with over $90 billion US, one of the biggest in the world. They actually invested different AI companies in China. So basically, this computers help us to design those drugs. So this surface shows the enzyme surface. Sometimes people ask me, how come you have a surface, they have different colors on this protein? I need to explain to them this is just a computational view of this. This is not real. But people really actually ask for that. So again, the structure solved by Professor Rao actually shows for this particular enzyme, you have 4 different pockets, right? I mean, you can tell this actually different pockets on the surface of the protein. And here you have a amino acid. We talk about proteins with different amino acids. This one with a amino acid called cysteine. Cysteine is an amino acid with the sial side group. If you remember your high school chemistry, that is the sulfur, like this. Okay, just like this one, if you remember your chemistry. But anyway, it doesn't matter if you do not. This actually is the active side, okay? This one is chemically reactive. So what you do, you would actually try to interact with this particular, this is again still pretty amazing, right? This is at the atomic resolution. Although we actually show this on the screen and the computer screen, it's just actually what we saw with atomic resolution of this protein surface. And you design a thing, the scientists actually from the Chinese Academy of Science designed a thing with a so-called warhead. It's almost like a missile to talk with this cysteine here, basically to form a handshake, if you will. This form a covalent bond. You can design a small molecule to interact with this guy here specifically. And this actually is really beautiful. Think about this. If you design such a drug, although I know you guys didn't really study medicine or chemistry, what is the major challenge if you can think about that? What is the technical hurdle? Can you name one? Let me tell you. So the major challenge for a drug is really to get specificity. So for protease or an enzyme like that, it catalyzes many similar processes in your body. Your cells actually catalyze many similar reactions at the same time. But if you want to actually have a drug that can only block this virus behavior without affecting yourself, that's really hard. Think about this like this. All of this we only have 20 different amino acids, right? Many of these amino acids actually include cysteines. So to design a thing that can only really stop the virus, it's really hard. So these people actually of course, published their paper in Science back to 2020 and utilize this warhead to talk with this S1 prime pocket. And this one can only kill the coronavirus, but not human. This actually is, again, quite impressive. This drug, to the best of my knowledge, is already in clinical phase 2. This actually is also hard because for clinical trials, you need to test the drug in many different patients. And as you guys probably know, after 2020 until early this year, there were really not that many patients got affected with COVID in China. So they really need to do those clinical trials in some foreign countries and make this actually drug development even more challenging. Other things, this is another paper published by a research group based in Chengdu in southwest China. It's actually a famous medical school also called Huaxi. This also actually is a medical school with over 100 years history. So their strategy is similar to utilize a warhead interacting with the similar S1 prime pocket. Again, this is based so-called on rational design to design small molecules. And in this paper, it's also published in the Journal of Science, they showed this actually work in vivo. So we call in vivo means something in life. So they actually test this compound in mice. So this actually compared to the control compounds, you can see actually this the top row were with actually the lung cells, the alveolar septum. And for each of this box, you have a zoom in, have a close-up view of this. So you give this drug either as an oral drug or actually IP. IP is the injection. You basically put this inject this under to your belly, and you can definitely see compared to the control where the thickening was released. So again, I want to say all of this is still actually at early stage, but again, compared to the conventional method, using the cutting-edge, state-of-the-art technology such as artificial intelligence, we already shortened the drug development process from almost 10 years to 2-3 years. So those drugs already in mid to late stage of clinical trials. And again, this would not be even possible. This was it's still pretty incredible. Compared to 20 years ago in China, we would not have that capacity. And we actually with this pandemic, we actually could do that. To me, I feel that's pretty impressive. And we also tested some new strategies also. I would just actually quickly, for the sake of time, I will just go through really quickly. So our immune system actually is very interesting. We have, you take the vaccine, right? And that's so-called adaptive immunity. You got this antibody to fight against the pathogen. You were also born with something called innate immunity. Basically, when you were born, you have this protection. So for the innate immunity, the major thing is called toll-like receptor. Any of you guys speak German here? Good. So when I talk about toll-like receptor, people always ask me the question, why is it's called toll-like receptor? Does this have anything to do with the toll booth? Take a toll or something? Can you tell people what toll means in German? Yeah, exactly. So toll, this is actually the German word. first identified this gene actually in Strasbourg, in France, but apparently like a lot of people speak German there also. So when they found this gene, they think it's pretty amazing, pretty great, as you mentioned. They say, oh, toad. They were like German would say, toad. It's an amazing gene. That means this innate immunity definitely is it's an amazing discovery. So this toad-like receptor, a so-called pathogen-associated molecular pattern, right? It protects ourselves. It's just like what we showcase here on this cover of this journal. It's just like the Chinese Great Wall, right? On the Great Wall watchtowers, you have some guards. They would watch some of the pathogens come to attack. So for example, like the bacteria, they would detect a chemical called the LPS, or like the cell wall component. Because unlike we human, the bacteria, they would have cell wall. So when our immune system find there is some cell wall component, or LPS, showing up, that definitely means this is not something human. There's some bacteria invasion. We want to turn up our self-defense and kill them. This is how this works. The problem, though, is that this defense sometimes goes like out of control. So, for example, TLR7 and 8 detect viral single-strand RNA, just like those from the COVID. The same thing with HIV also. So those single-stranded RNA has nothing to do with human. We do not actually produce those things. When they actually infect us, our immune system would actually like alarm, and then as this guards would do, they would actually shoot arrows to those viruses and kill them. However, this is a cascade mechanism, means they have a positive feedback. Right? When this actually happens, we would actually give signals and amplify this. So one of the major fatality causes at the early days of COVID basically is this thing called the cytokine storm. When this alarm was sound, they would actually turn on the cytokine release, and actually like when these things were released to the environment, too much of this would cause the organ failure, right? So early times, a lot of people who actually died from COVID, they were young people, because they have a really effective immune system. They actually really respond quickly. They have very good guards on the watchtowers. So this actually is one of the leading fatality reason for COVID. So we actually here at Tsinghua, my research group at the School of Pharmaceutical Science, we work on the toll-like receptor inhibitors. Basically, if this is a double-edged sword, it protects ourselves, but too much would actually hurt us also. We want to actually get a fine balance, right? You guys in China long enough to realize we always talk about the yin and the yang balance. It's always actually to try to actually find the tipping point and just right, like to control that. So this is effort we do, and actually this actually involves international collaborations also. Merck, for example, there is actually a European Merck, a German pharmaceutical company. There is American Merck also. So the American Merck also had a toll-like receptor inhibitor project using these new strategies for especially the serious symptom for COVID-19. So I will just quickly mention this is a discovery we had, just as an example. For this so-called immunomodulators, it's just modifying your immune system. They have problems. They have side effects, such as this one. This is this one is called Humira. This is the best-selling drugs in the world in the last 7 years, since 2015. This actually blocks the cytokine and release the rheumatoid arthritis symptom. However, when people take drugs like that, they would enter higher risk to get infected by the pathogens. This actually makes sense, right? You try to suppress some of your immune response, and it won't really sufficiently protect yourself. So what we do here in Tsinghua, we try to have the precise modulation of this. Where you get the virus infection, you want to turn on your self-protection at that particular point. And by just actually like really like just open the door for your self-protection at the TR7 site. The mechanism is rather complex. I would not actually elaborate too much here, but again, this is one of the examples we are trying innovative approach to attack drugs also. Besides those small molecules, any question here? I should stop here. Again, the last several slides might be a little technical. Right? So no more questions. So I'll go on and try to give some general introduction to the other strategies also. One of them is called neutralizing antibody. As we talk about our immune system, besides those innate immunity, we also have adaptive immunity, meaning you have alien things. You see alien things, such as the single-strand RNA, such as those cell wall component. You would actually, like your immune system would actually produce some antibodies to neutralize them. So if you can think about, compared to the small molecules, this actually involves much bigger molecules such as proteins. Okay, so this work is from a collaboration between Professor Zhang Linqi and Wang Xinquan, both of them from the medical school. They actually shows the ACE2. If you remember, this is the protein SARS-CoV-2 need to recognize before the virus can get into the cells, right? So you can think about the strategy to design a protein, basically blocks this, basically to shield this protein from the virus success. So by doing that, you can also block the virus get into the cells. So this strategy is called neutralizing antibodies. As you remember, back to 2020, actually President Donald Trump actually got affected with like early COVID, and back then there were basically no drugs available. Paxlovid was still not available back then. So unlike the hydroxychloroquine and the laundry detergent he actually recommended, he actually took those, he used this neutralizing antibodies. But the problem with those approaches is this is actually pretty expensive. And they use actually like antibody cocktails for the management of the symptoms. So last year, Professor Zhang actually was successful to push this through. This, again, is the first specific drug. Okay, this is a therapeutic, it's not a vaccine. This is therapeutic to treat COVID. Although, of course, those drugs actually are helpful, but they may not actually cure all the time. In medicine, we always talk about we only cure sometimes, but we want to actually help relieve often, and we want to comfort all the time. This is actually the practice we do. But by developing the very first neutralizing antibody at Tsinghua, we actually have this neutralizing antibody approach. So a couple of months ago, I heard from our colleague, President Zeng Rong, who is overseeing all of the research at Tsinghua. This already actually been used in the clinical practice in China here also. There are other technology used. For the sake of time, I'll just skip. Another thing, quick thing, is the test. These three young guys, these people look like students themselves also, but they're actually like three young faculty members at School of Pharmaceutical Science and School of Medicine. They actually like detect, they have like almost like a nucleic acid test you did, like sometimes today. They actually develop a device. You can carry out this nucleic acid test at home. I want to mention here that this actually was designed by the, this is School of Art, right? Like the School of Art and Design at Tsinghua also. So they actually like use the Tsinghua's color purple as this box. And this actually, if you guys go to the museum, the artistic museum, this box already became a one of the things they exhibit at the museum also. This apparently has the patent and actually carries the Tsinghua flavor. I think I gave like enough specific questions. specific examples of this drug development. One of the last part of this, to wrap this up, I want to actually have some statistics. We have already many different approach for drug development for COVID and also for vaccines. Vaccines is something, there are numerous vaccines being and still under development around the world. They have different doses. They have different administration strategies. This actually again, this is one of the common view for the landscape. One of the challenge when people take vaccines, they still most of them still use injections. So last month, this company called CanSino Bio, I guess, or in Chinese we would call that CanSino. This was the technology is again from one of the Tsinghua alumnus. This is a woman general, Chen Wei. He graduated from our Department of Chemical Engineering back in the 90s. See, their technology actually made it possible to inhale this aerosol of this vaccine. This actually became one of the inhalable vaccines around the world. To my best and to my knowledge, they're also trying to. There are also other efforts to have the inhalable fibrosis, because the lung fibrosis is one of the damage actually this COVID would actually cause to the lung, and this actually was for the fibrosis repair mechanism as well. This is the last slide for this part. This is again a new vaccine for the Omicron in particular. This was actually developed by Professor Fu Yangxing. So Yangxing actually lives we live at Shuangqing, neighborhood or compound. So his house, his apartment is actually really we live in the same the same building. And the other day actually I saw him. He was actually pretty excited. He thought my vaccine got approved. And this actually is actually one of the early Omicron vaccines in collaboration with this company called Lizhu Bio. Again, Tsinghua's effort. We just I think indeed people here do believe that really just what we show actually the sundials, right? Vector non-verbal. That's apparently we made our contributions to fight against those COVID. Let's see. I started at 7:20. 90 minutes I have until 8:50. So 15 minutes. I think that's actually pretty good. In the last 15 minutes, I want to have even more Chinese flavor in this introduction. Again, about the traditional Chinese medicine, or sometimes we call that TCM. Who in this room used TCM before? The traditional Chinese medicine. Anyone else? You guys? No? So what traditional Chinese medicine? That's very good. Yeah. A lot of these things actually she just mentioned actually were also could be regarded as food also. For example, ginger. Ginger could be used as a medicine, was herb medicine. So this actually is interesting, although people have different opinions about this also. But for the COVID, traditional Chinese medicine definitely play an important role. I would like to, again, use the last 15 minutes to talk a little bit about this. Again, I showed another picture for President Xi Jinping. This is, I actually remember, you probably recognize this face already. This is the guy who developed the neutralizing antibody, and that's back then when he actually worked in the lab. This was on March 20th in medical school. And when President Xi came, besides actually looking at his neutralizing antibody efforts, he also mentioned, I'll just actually translate here, don't worry if you can read the Chinese. Basically, he talked about that to fight against COVID, we want to actually use both the Western and the Eastern, the Oriental and Occidental medicines, to combine them in the anti-COVID campaign. Traditional Chinese medicine, many of them, actually we heard many of these names, also has really long history. So you guys roughly know some of these different dynasties and history of China. Basically, about over 2,000 years ago, from the spring and autumn period, already there's foundations of some of the TCM theory. And when over the 1,000 years, people really have been using different herbs to treat different disease. And in the last 100 years or so, people also try to combine some of the traditional medical practice with the modern Western contemporary medicine. This actually you also see similar cases in countries like South Korea, Japan, and Vietnam also. So there's some classic, classics of transmemory, for traditional Chinese medicine. If I want to actually mention one of them, probably this one. This is a book actually written by a guy from the Ming Dynasty. This is over 500 or 600 years ago. This roughly could be translated into Compendium of Materia Medica. Basically, they describe over about 20,000 different herbs and then their use, and they actually try to use the yin-yang theory to describe it and so on. So I want to be honest to you. This actually is still under heat debate. People have different opinions about traditional Chinese medicines. Many people think the theory of the traditional Chinese medicine theory does not fit the current, really contemporary science. How do we explain this? So I would like to act here in Tsinghua, this is an interesting topic also, because Tsinghua has our tradition in engineering. Yesterday I talked with a guy from chemical engineering department. I found that engineers actually like to describe things in this way. They try to look at things using actually a systemic approach. And we actually in biology, we like to use the reductionism, if you will. Basically, we will try to simplify with the model, right? We test a compound, we test a drug, we use these animal models. Of course, we didn't really try to cure the disease in mice or in rats, but rather this is a model system. But in a lot of different engineering systems, you want to actually look at the overall pictures. Sometimes I found maybe this could be a linkage between these two also. So in China, or in general, in the Oriental medicines, we would call this is a treatment for individuals. And for the Western medicines, it's more like a treatment for disease. So maybe there could be a alternative to actually combine these two, really again, eventually you want to reach happiness and health, right? This is actually the efficacy. So, but of course, for infectious disease, this is something herbal medicine or some of this, we call this alternative approach, could be particularly good at. Why is that? Because think about this, really for infectious disease, you have some pathogens, right? You have this bacteria, where you have these viruses, those actually were the pathogens. But really in nature, a lot of this natural product you found in this herb, different kind of plants, really it's a natural way to fight against those pathogens. Basically, your biological system develops those things to protect yourself and really prevent those bacteria or viruses to kill their host. So it makes sense. Those sources actually provide a good source for this for infectious disease. Of course, China also is actually among the early countries to use vaccinations also. For example, the human pox is really likely to so much earlier than the cowpox for the smallpox viruses. This is apparently one of the viruses we completely already get rid of. One of the really impressive success in the human anti-infectious disease history. So another good example, of course, is from TsinghuaUni also. This is the first scientific Nobel Prize China received for the work basically conducted in China. So Tu actually received the 2015 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for her discovery back in late 60s and early 70s for the artemisinin. This is a anti-malaria drugs that really save millions of people's life. So this is those actually could be good examples. So for artemisinin, actually is a so she talked about the story. She actually reads some of these traditional Chinese classics, suggesting this is the plant that helped to actually fight against malaria. And using a chemical solvent called ether, her team extracted those chemicals from this natural source and then come up with this drug. There are other examples also. Arsenic is a poison, right? People actually have been used this actually across the world to as a poison, it's a toxic agent. But also for leukemia or the blood cancer, leukemia actually is a very effective therapeutics. And actually if you 30, 40 years ago, if a person got leukemia, it's almost like a death sentence. There is very high likelihood to die. And these days, actually for leukemia and lymphoma, the death rate actually is much lowered. Actually, talk about this. I have a young student in my undergraduate student in my lab. He's really right after the Chinese New Year last year, he saw his platelets count actually lower to 9. So when you do this count, you really got about 150 to 300 or something like that. It's a normal range. And he actually got a bleeding nose, and that's really due to really low platelet. He was diagnosed with M4 leukemia, but really actually after 3 months treatment, he was fully recovered. That's again, this a lot of this current contemporary medicine is really helpful for those diseases. So this is an example. I want to mention quickly that traditional Chinese medicines also played a role in this COVID-19 pandemics. So really quick. So back then, again, December 2019, the first cases of COVID were reported. But back then, there were really no available drugs. So the national effort involved organizing traditional Chinese medicine, including Bailangen, as we just heard, because this actually has been a lot of Chinese kids took this when they were young. It's a decoction. It's almost like decoction. You actually use hot waters and this to drink it. This was supposed to help to boost the immune system and really release some of these cold symptoms. Some of this have been actually approved by the Chinese Food and Drug Administration also. This is called 3 formulas. Three medicines. It should be, sorry about the typo. It should be 3 medicines and 3 formulas. Formulas means different, just basically different combinations of different herbs. Because in the traditional Chinese medicines, you're not supposed to, just like I'll show you a picture, it's usually not one single kind of herb. You actually mix different things together, and they suppose they actually would work together and team up to have a synergistic effect, basically. So those were actually recommended by the Chinese Food and Drug Administration, those drugs and those formulas. And also this actually includes some of this basically intravenous. So this is actually extraction from the traditional medicines, and they would inject through intravenous into the vein. And this actually is called 血逼镜. It's particularly good for patients. But of course, there were, when I introduced this, there's also current debate on the safety of those, right? Because I have to admit, although we talk about traditional Chinese medicines, for a person like me, I basically got almost all of my professional training in Western countries. I think actually like to have double-blinded, large-scale safety data for those traditional Chinese medicine would be really helpful, because China is still one of the countries with the highest rate for liver disease. And this actually because liver is our detoxination organ. And young kids take some of this medicine without sufficient safety data could be one of the leading cause of this. Of course, with emergency needs, emergency use under a pandemic situation, I think this is something acceptable. But for long-term and chronic use, we definitely do need large-scale, double-blinded scientific evaluation for such traditional Chinese medicines. I think pretty much for other things, actually I would just like this, I would show this as my last slide. Again, at Tsinghua, traditional Chinese medicines became one of our focus again. This is early this year. This is the National Administration of Traditional Medicine, the secretary of that ministry, along with our president, to sign up an agreement contract to work together, Tsinghua, and also work with the China Academy of Chinese Medical Sciences. And we do believe that some of this Chinese traditional medicine's modernization, along with the modern Chinese traditional medicine, sounds like a tongue twister, would be actually really quite useful. Remember, actually, back in 2020, we talked with our African friends at the Sino-Africa Summit to share our experience with this anti-COVID, because those TCM did actually work pretty well in Wuhan and Zhejiang, and people who received those traditional Chinese medicine did actually have a very high recovery rate. Of course, most of the people did recover from the disease. So 90 minutes is short, but with this short time, I was hoping to give you just a glance of a perspective of a person like myself with some more medical and pharmaceutical science background on this in this global campaign. I think this again is a huge worldwide efforts to fight against historic, really daunting challenge to beat the COVID-19 disease. But we try to actually combine modern technologies, the medical science theory from both the Western and Chinese traditions. And in particular, I feel like in China, at Tsinghua University, we actually present such a platform to bring all the different things together and also to contribute to this global efforts. With that, I would conclude my class today. Thank you very much.